Don't miss the history, the tradition, and the pageantry of big-time college football. It's bowl season in Orlando. Orlando's New Year's tradition returns when the number 17 Iowa Hawkeyes meet the number 21 Tennessee Volunteers in the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl. Be there live for one of the biggest bowl games of the year. Visit CheezItCitrusBowl.com.
Looking for a fun way to win up to 25 times your money this basketball season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry. You could turn $10 into $250. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/fan and use code FAN. That's code FAN at prizepicks.com/fan.
Must be present in certain states. Visit prizepicks.com for restrictions and details.
Welcome to 3 Yards Per Carry, a podcast covering the Miami Dolphins and the NFL. Now, here's your hosts, Chris, Alf, and Simon.
Welcome to our Thursday preview of 3 Yards Per Carry. Looking forward to the biggest game, perhaps the biggest game in the NFL this season, between the Baltimore Ravens and our Miami Dolphins, who travel to the Queen City for this AFC matchup, number 1 against number 2 in the conference, potentially for the number 1 seed. I, of course, am Simon Clancy, with Alfredo Arteaga and Chris Kaufman is back. Happy Christmas to those of you that didn't join us on our Tuesday show. I hope you have had a nice week with family and friends and all those sorts of things. But we are laser focused now on the biggest challenge potentially the Dolphins will face, maybe all season really, and that is John Harbaugh's, whichever Harbaugh you want, John Harbaugh's Baltimore Ravens. Before we get into that though, don't forget our show, as always, is brought to you by Prize Picks. Use the promo code 3, that's the number 3 yards, to get a $100 match bonus on your $100 deposit. And by Manscaped, get 20% off and free shipping with the code 5, that's the number 5, RSN at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com, and use the code 5RSN. It's the perfect time, quite frankly, for friends and family who you haven't seen. Here's a good present idea. Alf, here's another present idea. Tell the folks about Factor Meals.
Well, we have a dedicated page over at factormeals.com, and if you go to factormeals.com/3 yards per carry 50, and of course that 3 yards per carry is the number 3 yards per carry 50, and use the promo code of the same 3 yards per carry 50, you get 50% off your first order.
So let's look ahead to this game, and we may as well start when the Dolphins have the ball and when the Ravens are on defense, because this is an outstanding defense. We talked about it a bit last night, Alf, you and I, on our OnlyFins chat. Really strong at all 3 levels. Corners are great with Stevens and Marlon Humphrey, and they've got depth with Armour Davis and Darby and those guys. The safeties are excellent, notably Carl Hamilton, who is playing as well as anybody in the league at any position, will be an all-pro, maybe in the running for Defensive Player of the Year in terms of just what he's able to do. Mike McDonald calling the plays. He's mixing up, just seen a graph, he's mixing up coverages more than any defensive coordinator in the league. So Miami will have that to look out for. And obviously that the linebacking crew, Roquan Smith, Patrick Queen, a free agent at the end of the season, playing brilliant football. Roquan Smith playing sensationally. And then inside interior defensive line, they're stout against the run with Michael Pierce. Justin Madwike, I think, has 11.5 or 12 sacks, will probably be an all-pro. And the edges are speedy and can get to the quarterback as well. It's a 3-level defense that provides all sorts of problems with a defensive coordinator who's calling plays at the top of his game.
Absolutely. And they're a defense that's highly mobile. They want to keep their linebackers as clean as possible. So you got to do the opposite. You got to muddy it up a little bit. You got to keep them involved. You got to keep them with a guy in their face. You got to keep them mindful of the flat, which means throwing to your backs, which means running inside, which means releasing your guards to the second level. So they're at their best, and that defense is at their best when Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith are just running sideline to sideline. You can't allow that. You just cannot allow that. You got to give them a lot to do. And the good news is Miami's capable of giving them a lot to do, because Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert are capable pass-catching backs, and so can Jeff Wilson get involved in this passing game. So That's going to be key above all else. If they're running free sideline to sideline, they're too free to play too many of their coverages. So that's going to be the early key in this game, is to see your backs involved in the passing game, because that's the way forward to some success on offense.
Chris, Baltimore have kind of set the standard in terms of ability, in terms of talent. You look at their wins this season, the 49ers, who they crushed on Monday, but the Jaguars, the Rams, the Lions, the Seahawks. I mean, they blew the Lions away at home. They are 4-3 at home, oddly, and had a few struggles. And the Rams, obviously, with a scheme that very much mirrors ours, took them to overtime. How do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, I think that the Baltimore defense is very good situationally. This is how I see their defense. I think that it's a marriage between the defense and offense, because the offense is the number one rushing team in the league. And so they have, with that comes sort of the ability on defense to play more situationally and to excel in situations. And so, we're talking about third downs, we're talking about red zone, bowing up in the red zone. And so Miami, they'll have to be on top of things in the red zone this time. Miami's been a good red zone team all year, but lately, not so much. So Miami's going to have to get on top of it there. And then they're going to have to not, commit the sort of mistakes that get them into the more predictable situations, because Baltimore tends to feast on that. However, looking at how Baltimore played the Dolphins a year ago in week 2, looking at how Baltimore played the Rams in week 14 this year, looking at how Baltimore even played the 49ers. This is an interesting sort of, there's sort of a contrast in the ways that you can look at it, because there is a reason that Miami chewed them up a year ago, right, in week 2. They can give the Baltimore defense, particularly when you space them out a little bit in the passing game, they can give a lot of free access and a lot of space on that field for Miami's very, very fast, style of offense. And I realize that Jalen Waddle, we'll talk about that, is probably not going to play. And that the fast offensive skill players basically breaks down to Tyreek Hill, but then also, Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane. They can give a lot of free access in that secondary. And if their linebackers are not able to get depth, then that's the bad combination for Miami. But if they're doing that, that means that they have shut down the run game without much issue. That they're not afraid of it. They're not afraid of the run game. They're not afraid of little quick passes to the backs or with matchups against linebackers. It means they're not afraid of those things. So Miami has to make them afraid of those things. But if they're not getting depth, then this looks a little bit like, you're going to laugh, because Baltimore's defense is so good and so not the Commanders' defense. But when I looked at the Commanders' defense ahead of time, I was, you knew that this was shaping up to be a great game for Miami offensively because of the free access that they allow all throughout the secondary. Miami can get to that against the Baltimore Ravens. They can get to that if they avoid some bad situations, and they avoid some bad situational play calls, and they avoid, shoot yourself in the foot type of penalties that present the Baltimore Ravens defense opportunity to play certain ways and shut down certain things in a very one-sided manner. So I think that overall, yes, if Miami does play a sloppy game, and we've seen them do that offensively, then it plays right into Baltimore's hands, particularly if Miami's defense is not stopping Baltimore's run too. However, if they're not, then there are going to be things to be had in the passing game for Miami. The combination of two is quick decision making, ultra quick decision making, getting the ball out with, as JT O'Sullivan would say, capital A anticipation, to Tyreek Hill, who is a different speed than anything Baltimore's seen, that secondary has seen this year. there's going to be stuff to be had. So it's going to be really interesting to see which way it breaks, because Mike McDonald, who was the defensive coordinator when they got embarrassed a year ago, he's going to feel some kind of way about that, and so he's going to try and think of some things to stop Miami's offense. But if they play with that much free access, I'm not sure it's going to happen.
Yeah, Alf, Mike McDonald likes to build pressures, to attack protections. He likes to drop interior defensive linemen or show blitzes with linebackers, then drop them off into coverage. And the structure of their defense kind of remains consistent when you look at the tape, but they're actually able to change the presentation, I suppose, of what they're sending, what they're doing, with lots of different fronts, lots of different personnel groups, which essentially just allows his unit to kind of bank reps throughout the season. So they're not relying on guys all of a sudden to be thrown in. This is not a good example, but an Ethan Bonner, for example, being thrown in having had no snaps. You look at their defense, you look at the players who've played multiple snaps on the defensive line: Travis Jones, Madubuike, Michael Pierce, Brent Urban. At linebacker, Clowney, Malik Harrison, Adafe Owe, Patrick Queen, Roquan Smith, Carl Van Noy. I mean, I think Van Noy's got 7 or 8 sacks this season. And in the secondary, Jalen Armour-Davis, Ronald Darby, Carl Hamilton, Marlon Humphrey, Arthur Millet's had a couple of picks last couple of weeks, Brandon Stevens. I think Geno Stone still leads the NFL in interceptions. I mean, I didn't even mention Marcus Williams early on, who's one of the better free safeties in the league. Rock Ya-Sin, the former second-round pick of the Colts, who's playing for them as well. Lots and lots of players have been banking snaps on that defense. And, you can just rotate guys in and out, in and out, in and out the whole time. And that's not even mentioning guys like Tyus Bowser, who's on injured reserve, Trayvon Mullen, David Ajabo, all of those kind of players. So it's a unit that knows exactly what it's supposed to be. And Chris mentioned a very key thing there: mistakes. Miami has to play a mistake-free game, don't they? If this is to stay, if they're to stay in touch.
Oh, absolutely. It starts with a zero turnover game. Now, are they capable? Absolutely. They've done it several times in the last few weeks. That's going to be key above all else. When everybody looks at the Ravens defense, they still have it in their head that it's a Wink Martindale defense and they're going to bring the heat. No, for 2 years, it's been a little bit more conservative of a defense, but they do bring a lot of simulated pressures, a lot of pressure 5 stuff. And that's actually given Jadeveon Clowney essentially a resurgence in his career. He's been very, very, very good. And we always knew he was really good against the run. This year, he's actually having a pretty damn good season as a pass rusher. They're going to occupy your guards to try to set up one-on-one on your tackles. So Teron Armstead is going to have to be left on an island once again. You tend to trust him. So the key is going to be on the other side with Austin Jackson, who I do expect to play. He's going to have a lot of one-on-one opportunities because they're going to want to occupy you up front. And since you have Tua Tagovailoa, remember we tend to block for him a little bit different than most teams. You want to keep him very, very clean up front. So you're going to devote the numbers inside, which means that your tackles are going to be all alone. That's going to be hugely important in this game. And yeah, absolutely. Mike McDonald has done a wonderful job with this team. I don't know if they have a defensive coordinator or a coordinator award of the year award, but he deserves it. A lot of the stuff that he puts on tape is confusing. It looks like cover 3. One thing I did kind of pick up on, without Kyle Hamilton, we'll know more on Friday if he's going to play. He's likely to play, I would say, although he's nursing a couple of injuries. Without him, they can't play cover 3, which is their best coverage, and which is actually a coverage that Tua's had a little bit of success against. So that's something that's worth monitoring. Without Kyle Hamilton, their pass defense, their passer rating against goes down by 30. I mean, goes up by 30 points. So that's how important he is. Arthur Mallett is also nursing an injury, and so is Armour Davis. So that's also worth monitoring as the week goes on.
Yeah, just to tidy that up, Madubuike has 12 sacks, Jadeveon Clowney has 8.5, Van Noy has 7. So they're getting some real work from those veterans on the edge there at linebacker. One thing that I think is really key in this game is the Dolphins' ability to be able to get mileage out of people that aren't called Tyreek Hill. We talked about it last night, Alf, and we will say it here. Jalen Waddle is not going to play in this game for the Dolphins. This injury is as mild, in inverted commas, of a high ankle sprain as it is. it's still a high ankle sprain, and I think all three of us would be absolutely shocked if he played in this game. Robbie Anderson still in concussion protocol today, still in the red jersey. So, you wonder about that. Is it, the relationship between Tua and Cedric Wilson has picked up over the last few weeks. Obviously, huge reliance on Braxton Berrios, huge reliance on River Craycraft. Is this potentially a game for an Anthony Schwartz to come up from the practice squad, Chris, in terms of just offering some speed if Chosen, if Waddle are both out of the game?
I think I would normally want to say yes, because we, with a lot of the space that I was talking about before, and less disruption, then you want guys running through the secondary at fast speeds. But this is a defense that is so on top of things fundamentally that I think that you don't want to risk the mistakes. I happen to think that Tyreek Hill, if he's healthy and playing the game, is actually enough to do what you need to do to that secondary in terms of utilizing a lot of space over the middle, depending on the depth of the linebackers. I think that that's enough. And what you want to do with guys like River Craycraft, Braxton Berrios, is take advantage of kind of small spaces underneath. I think that this could be the game where, because of the red zone presentation that you have with the Baltimore defense, and because of the way that they play their defense, and sort of the ways that you can I guess victimize them, or try to anyway. This could actually be a good game for Chase Claypool to get a little bit more action than he has been. Now he has to be on top of his things too, as well, and not be making mistakes with his adjustments and where he sits down in the zone, and so on and so forth. His chemistry with Tua is going to be very important, but he and run after catch guys, guys that are big, strong, and can do some things after the catch. This could be a nice little test for that, whether they're on top of their game for on Sunday. So I would not look so much at Anthony Schwartz. I would just be looking a little bit more at like Claypool. What's he going to do? What's River Craycraft going to do? What's Cedric Wilson going to do? Like you said, somebody else has to step up in place of Jalen Waddle. But yeah, I think that with the access, that Tyreek Hill could be enough kind of between the 20s, and then when you get to the red zone, that's where you could see a surprising Chase Claypool pop up in that red zone area.
Yeah, I suppose the one worry is, of course, Tyreek's still not 100% healthy with his own ankle issue. Before we go to break, one last question. I wonder whether Miami might look at what the Rams did to the Ravens a few weeks ago and copy what Sean McVay did. Obviously, the offense is very similar. These two coaches out of the same school, Mike McDaniel. There's a lot of McDaniels, McDonald's, and McVays. McDaniel and McVay, obviously, out of the same school of play caller, grew up together in terms of their coaching youth, as it were. But the Rams played much more condensed than normal. They ran the ball really well out of 11 personnel. They overmanned the Ravens up front, and they did so in large part because Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp blocked so well from inside out. They lined them up almost next to the tackles on a huge amount of snaps, way more than normal. So a big onus on Craycraft, who's an excellent blocker, Wilson, who's an excellent blocker, Claypool, who we know has been an excellent blocker. And as I was just looking at some of his blocks yesterday on the All-22, and actually he's been an excellent blocker in spurts for the Dolphins. Could you see Mike McDaniel change things up and play much more condensed out of 11 personnel in terms of how he lines players up?
I'm pretty certain that was the first piece of tape that he put on this week, because as soon as you look at the box score, you see you have nearly a 300-yard passer, and you have a running back go for 115. You want to know how that happened against that defense.
The flip side to that, though, sorry to interrupt you, the flip side to that is then looking at the other scheme of the three schemes that are very similar in the NFL. Shanahan, McVay, McDaniel obviously worked really well for McVay, worked terribly for Shanahan. So you've got to find the nuance between the two, haven't you?
Oh, absolutely. Although I would caution against terribly for 49ers. I think those turnovers were just too much to take. They had 420 yards.
I agree with
429 yards of offense. They had opportunities. You just can't turn it over 5 times against a good team. You're going to get killed. It was a
And
miracle
that was Alf. That was Brock Purdy. Like that. If you look at those turnovers, like that was Brock Purdy being uncharacteristically late on a lot of stuff, and it was some mistakes, outright mistakes.
Do you think that, Chris, then goes back to what we talked about at the top of the show, and that's ever-changing coverages in terms of what McDonald does, in terms of lining up one way? I mean, I was reading some of the beat writers who were talking to Shanahan, who said that essentially they were showing one thing, dropping into another, and then as Purdy was going to throw, they were dropping into something else. So in terms of just mixing up coverages and rotating guys from, underneath to into the middle of the field and guys from the middle to the outside, all those sorts of things. Do you think we'll see that again in terms of that? It felt like they had a plan for the spot thrower, and obviously that's what Tua is, a spot thrower. And Brandon Stevens talked about it in the game afterward, in the locker room afterwards, about how they practiced all week for spot throwers specifically in terms of coverages. So how do you kind of play that against? Because Stafford is less of a spot thrower than the other two.
Yeah, I think that Brock Purdy in this case. I mean, if you really look at the number of plays that we're talking about here, first interception, he was just way late over the middle, and it wasn't actually that difficult of a read. I'm not sure why he was truly that late over the middle, in the end zone and against that too high look. He was just very late, and you could kind of picture, and it's so different from Tua because you could kind of picture we're used to seeing the Dolphins offense. We kind of have an idea when that ball would come out, of Tua's hands, and it was just so much later. And then you have another situation, an interception where there's a cat blitz on, and there's a guy directly in the passing lane for the screen, and Brock Purdy kind of throws it anyway. And I think that's also a little bit different from Tua too, because Tua, not that he's Superman or anything, but it's when there's a guy, he's good with passing lanes. Tua has always been good with passing lanes, despite being short. He will see it, he will pump and reload, or just throw it into the first row of the stands. And then there's another interception Brock Purdy throws and this was almost like a Zach Wilson type of play where yes, it was pretty well covered. But he starts running around trying to get away from the rush, and he's twirling around and going every which direction. That's not Tua either. Like Tua doesn't do that, for better or worse. Sometimes worse, And so like that's very uncharacteristic too. And then you look at some other stuff, and then there's some other stuff that happens kind of late because it was late and because it was the scoreboard was out of control. I think that there were some interesting mistakes that were going on with the 49ers and with Brock Purdy that just don't seem to map over that well with what Tua Tagovailoa does as a quarterback. So it's going to be interesting to see which way it breaks. They will disguise those coverages, and they are very diverse in their coverage packages. But so are the Commanders. the Commanders are very diverse in their coverage packages as well. And we just threw the ball all over the yard against them, because they allowed so much free access and so much space. So I think the really key is going to be whether we can prevent those linebackers from getting depth. If those linebackers get a lot of depth, then we can start to be in trouble. But if not, watch out.
And that was the success that the 49ers had with Warner and Greenlaw and Al-Shaair in the game that we lost last season. We are going to break. When we come back, we will look at what happens when the Dolphins are on defense. This is 3 yards per carry.
Let me tell you about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. We are the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. And now it's time to make Monday night and Thursday night football much more interesting. And with basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League, a league created specifically for combo projections that include 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, can can you imagine taking LeBron James and Travis Kelce over or under 10.5? 3-point field goals made and receptions. PrizePicks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. Go to prizepicks.com/3yards. That's the number 3 yards, and use the promo code 3yards for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/the number 3 yards. Use the promo code 3yards. Deposit $100. You get $100. Born in Waco, Texas, Balcones Distilling is where centuries-old tradition meets the intentional and innovative craft of whiskey making. Since opening in 2008, they've been committed to creating unique and expressive whiskeys that can only be made in Texas. Their products go beyond your standard sipping whiskey using 2 yeasts and a longer fermentation and densely packed oak barrels, all intentionally and methodically done to extract more nuanced flavors. It's the Balcones way. Backed by a team who is committed to creating expansive, expressive whiskey with its original stamp every day. Experience the bold, unforgettable taste of Balcones. Discover the exciting flavors of its award-winning lineup of American single malts or the classic Baby Blue Straight corn whiskey, or get your hands on one of its special release bottles released seasonally. Visit balconesdistilling.com, balconesdistilling.com to check out their entire whiskey lineup. Balcones Whiskey, distilled to appreciate. Distilled and bottled by Balcones Distilling, Waco, Texas. Please drink responsibly.
Orlando's New Year's tradition returns when the number 17 Iowa Hawkeyes meet the number 21 Tennessee Volunteers in the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl. Visit CheezItCitrusBowl.com.
Are you a South Florida property owner with an insurance claim? Are you dealing with water, mold, or fire damage to your home or business? Are you having trouble locating a 5-star rated general contractor that is fully licensed, certified, and insured? If the answer is yes, then Water Cleanup of Florida is here for you 24 hours a day. With over 60 years of combined experience, Michael, Robert, Jorge, and their team is prepared to handle any size property damage disaster. When an unexpected damage occurs to your home or business, you need specialized, fast, and reliable services. Water Cleanup of Florida understands the impact and stress an unexpected disaster may cause. Their objective is to make the cleanup and insurance claim process painless and hassle-free. Water Cleanup of Florida is also a licensed general contractor, so they provide the A to Z service, one-stop shopping that busy homeowners and business owners require. Water Cleanup of Florida is now an authorized dealer of Eurocraft cabinets, so premier kitchen, bath, and laundry cabinetry, countertops, and other accessories are available for your viewing at their showroom in Boca Raton. Or do you prefer to shop from your home or office? Then Water Cleanup will send you one of our design specialists to you with samples and products that fit your style and budget. Call Michael anytime on his personal cell phone if you have any questions at 954-579-0356. That's 954-579-0356. Or visit their website at wcufl.com. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram. And please check out their more than 80 5-star reviews on Google and Facebook. Water Cleanup of Florida. If you have the schmutz, they have the guts.
I'm Jalen Phillips, and you're listening to 3 Yards Per Carry.
Welcome back to 3 Yards Per Carry. This is our Baltimore preview, our Week 17 preview. I'm nervous about the game already. I don't know what you guys are feeling. When the Ravens have the ball, in the first half, we looked at what happens when the Ravens are on defense. When the Ravens have the ball, obviously, it all starts with their quarterback, Lamar Jackson. The difference, I think, guys, for me with Lamar this year is that he is finally surrounded by talent at all 3 spots. Mark Andrews has obviously been the stud for him for years. There is a kind of a 4-headed run game, which is now down to a 3-headed run game because Keaton Mitchell obviously tore his ACL, but they can still obviously move the ball with any one of those guys, whether it's Justice Hill, whether it's Gus Edwards. Lamar obviously runs it himself. And at receiver, obviously now with Zay Flowers, with Odell Beckham, and look, it's not the same Odell Beckham as it was in New York, but the guy can still make plays. You know, Flowers, Beckham, Bateman is playing well. That there are guys at all levels for him now that, you know, and one of the things Alf and I talked about last night, Chris, is that Miami have had a number of almost sacks, and there were a number last week against Dak Prescott where it felt like he was going down, and then Miami have got to take Lamar down if they get the chance, haven't they? Because he can just create danger. I mean, as he did in the game last year, everybody forgets because of the comeback, but you forget that he had that long touchdown run in the game because we just couldn't get a hand on him.
Yeah, I think that getting him down, that's obviously easier said than done. A lot of people are kind of under the mistaken impression, oh, all you have to do is, you just have to contain him and make him play, quote unquote real quarterback, and that's of course pure nonsense. I think that when you're facing this offense, if they can get the ball going on the ground the way that they do, they generally have, and they'll use Lamar Jackson in order to do that, then you're in trouble. Then you're a little bit in trouble on defense. That's why it's an interesting matchup with Miami's defense, which, notwithstanding that first game against the Los Angeles Chargers, where they had no background tape on what the Chargers offense would look like under Kellen Moore, because they played nobody in their preseason, games, and they, Austin Eckler just ran all over Miami. It was also, new install for the guys up front. Since that game where they allowed 233 yards, they've been outstanding against the run. Vic Fangio has allowed the defensive front to be, the term I used on Twitter the other day is kaiju. They're just they're outstanding. They're dominant players, and I think that if Miami can stop that run, then we are talking about a very potentially better scenario for the Dolphins. I will say this though, Vic Fangio has coached against Lamar Jackson twice. One of the games got cut short to only 3 drives because Lamar got hurt. For whatever it's worth, those 3 drives were all, almost like 3 and out type failures. But the other game, it's kind of a very modest offensive performance for Lamar too in that game, aided by the Broncos punted like 10 times, 10 of their first 11 drives or something like that. So it's not that Vic Fangio has an established history of being weak to Lamar Jackson necessarily, but it's going to be interesting how that run shapes up against our run defense.
Would you blitz him, Chris?
Would I blitz Lamar Jackson?
Yeah,
that's if I could be solid on the answer to that, then I would be paid very well as a defensive coordinator in the NFL. But I think that it's worth noting that in the past, Lamar Jackson has had trouble with exotic blitzes. And you can go back to 2021 when Brian Flores and Josh Boyer whipped out all the zeros against him, and he was just absolutely perplexed. Now, when they turned around and faced us again in week 2 last year, it was still Josh Boyer, and we still attacked in kind of the same way. Clearly, they had worked on answers to that, and they diced Miami's defense up last year. But this is a completely new approach with Vic Fangio. What I know is that Vic Fangio will not blitz him. Vic Fangio will probably not blitz him. Vic Fangio will probably only blitz very situationally. He gets a little bit happier about it, say, if they're backed up to their own end zone. But other than that, I think it's going to be only in very intense moments. But I wouldn't be surprised if those very intense moments, when Fangio does dial it up, if it got home. So that's kind of what I think.
Yeah, Alf, just before we get to our predictions, to me, Lamar is kind of a 2-play quarterback in that he's got 2 plays in one because he has the throw, but if you shut down the throw, he has the ability to beat you with his feet. And there isn't, when you watch Baltimore on tape, there isn't one play that kind of stands out that is their bread and butter. They're going to call more than, any other because of that reason, and it doesn't matter if it's, 4 verts or curls or flats or 3-level routes. It doesn't matter. There's not going to be a route they're going to call more than they necessarily would need to, because when he gets outside the pocket, play 2 of what he can do sort of takes over, and that's what sets him apart from everything else. That and the ability to people keep saying, "Oh, he can't pass in the pocket, can't pass in the pocket." I mean, I think that was kind of destroyed in 2019, and he remains a good pocket passer. But these 2-play quarterbacks have killed us in the past. Josh Allen forever on 3rd down, picking up yards with his feet. a huge game for the linebackers and for whoever plays safety, just in terms of just not vacating that middle of the field so that, if we shut play one down, he doesn't become that two-play quarterback.
Yeah, ever since Jalen Phillips got injured, they've been playing this 52 front that I find absolutely fascinating, and it's absolutely impenetrable. Okay, they play Raekwon Davis as a 0 or shading as a 1 on either side. They play both defensive tackles in Sealer and Wilkins, and then they have their edge players in Chubb and Wilkins, and and Van Ginkel. And what they do is that Duke Riley is actually dictating where that front is going to either shift to or who's staying on or off. So he's talking to the edge players as far as who gets the back, who gets the flat. And those simulated pressures could be huge because you're showing 5 with your middle linebacker up on the line of scrimmage. That's 6. So now they're calling protections, but you're only bringing 4, and they don't know it. And that was a problem for Dak Prescott this past Sunday. I think that's the way forward. I don't think you have to blitz Lamar Jackson. You're just going to have to disguise all your pressures over and over again. And that's, I think, going to be the biggest one, because you could just keep bringing Duke Riley in the A gap. That's going to give him off his spot, and that gets him running. And then you start running side to side. And if you do that, you can get to him. You can't slow down that offense, because believe it or not, yes, I absolutely agree with you. There's 2 plays with that he plays with, but that first play is mostly on timing, and it's mostly inside out with Zay Flowers as the primary as of late. So if you got that covered inside, and that's something that Miami has done as of late as well, and they did it against Dallas masterfully, where they're playing middle of the field open defenses, but they have essentially a picket fence right across the field with 3 defenders. So there's essentially no space to throw the football. And then you had the pass rush bearing down on you. I think those simulated pressures are going to be huge in this game, with Duke Riley, David Long, the interior backers getting up the field as we send our edge players out into the flat or as spies. What's going to be important for that? Safety play. Safety play is going to have to be really, really good. And that's why if Javon Holland can give it a go, he'll be a huge piece in this game.
He will be. He will be. Right, let's get to predictions before we get out of here. We have 2.5 minutes left on our Zoom chat. So, Alf, starting with you, what is your prediction for this game?
I think it's Miami's year. I think they're going to make a deep run this year. They're going to make a run at the Super Bowl. I don't know if they get there, but I think they're going to get close, and it's going to start with a win at M&T Bank Stadium. They're getting perfect weather. I say Miami. Jason Sanders kicks them through to another win, 23-20, Miami.
Chris?
I'm going to say, I think 27 points wins the game for Miami on offense. And I think it could be a 27-20 type of outing. The Miami offense will be glad to not be facing Micah Parsons. And honestly, I think that Miami is on top of their stuff now in terms of playing a little bit cleaner. And we'll see on Sunday. But if they do, there's going to be space. There's going to be space and opportunities to run as well as opportunities to pass. And so that's what I see.
I'm going to be the bad guy here. I'm sorry, people. I'm sorry. I'm going Baltimore 31, Miami 20. I just have a bad feeling. But then maybe I'm a glass half empty because I've just been hurt by these Dolphins 2 times before.
Simon, you're not a glass half empty guy. You're a glass half full of cyanide guy.
Yeah, I'm a glass fucking hell. I can't take this much more. It's honestly, that Dallas game was fucking torturous. My son, who hates sport, was sat next to me.
Are you more afraid of Miami winning or of Miami losing? Because if Miami wins, then the pressure really ratchets up.
Yeah, that's a really
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, Miami wins. You understand that making the Super Bowl is like the bare minimum, right?
I'm going to freak out if they win. I mean, I freaked out when my son was like, what is wrong with you? I was like, mate, you have no understanding or idea of what's happening in my body right now. But yeah, I mean, maybe this is a bit of reverse psychology. We shall see. Whatever happens, we will be here for you on Monday or maybe Tuesday because it's New Year. I can't remember how it's playing out, but it might be New Year's Day, whatever. But we will be back. We will look back at what happens in the game. We'll break it all down. And then next week, we will preview the final game of the season, which may or may not be the biggest game, the next biggest game of the Dolphins season, depending on what happens at M&T Bank Stadium on Sunday. Thanks for being with us. See you next week.
Thanks for listening to 3 Yards Per Carry. You can subscribe via iTunes, on Podbean, or your usual podcast provider.
When you stay at a Verbo, you always get the whole home. Not part of it, but the whole upstairs, the whole downstairs, the whole fridge, the whole backyard, and the whole nap room. Because is it really a vacation home if you have to share it with the host? Only whole vacation homes. Always all yours. Book on the Verbo app.
Orlando's New Year's tradition returns when the number 17 Iowa Hawkeyes meet the number 21 Tennessee Volunteers in the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl. Visit CheezItCitrusBowl.com.